All right. Hello, this is Scott Schertzen from Tales from the Film Set, and welcome to Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on the app stores of iOS and Android devices. When you download, do kindly make sure to leave a comment. Both apps are free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. And I hope you guys are having yourselves a good night out there. If you're over in Australia, like the new contact I just made over there, good morning to you. This is Tales from the Film Set, where basically a bunch of people get together and talk about all the weird and odd things that we've dealt with when it comes to the film industry, the surprise, the funny, the nutty, whatever it is, we're all good with it. In this particular case, I'm joined by Mr. Rob Stats, who just walked out as soon as I said that. And he's back in again. Now it's okay. Jasmine actually is basically will not be on tonight. She sent me a message earlier. She's running behind with some other stuff. So in her stead, we have Mr. Candid Frank Stanisi out of Toronto, who has his own show, which I'm sure we're going to have to talk about a little bit there, who apparently has done some extra work in Canada. So we will be discussing that as well. But how you gentlemen doing tonight?
Okay, Bob's drinking. I'm doing fine.
All right, perfect. There we go.
I'm good. I'm just getting resituated. Yeah, Scott, I was like,
5 o'clock was 4 hours ago. What's that?
No, and you just he's like, hey, Jasmine's not on tonight. I'm like, okay. It's like, give me a second. I was like, yeah, and I didn't realize it was like 8:45. I'm like, oh, I have like 3 things to do before I jump on camera. So I was running around.
Well, I only sent you the message at like 8:46.
Yeah.
So, it was funny because it was one of those things where I was all set to do the show solo in this case, but I'd sent down a message earlier in the day. And then by the time I saw Frank's message, I'm like, okay, I'm not doing solo anymore. So Frank was good enough to be on. Thank you for that, sir. And I figured, you know what? You've sent us chat messages last week. Why don't you just pop on? So, all right. So let me start off by saying that I got 3 unexpected checks in the mail in the last 24 hours. I've gotten 2 checks, and maybe Rob, you can explain this being a union rep in the States. I got 2 checks from Prodigal Son, a total of about $10. And a check from Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, the movie, for $331. But it was none of them were residual checks.
Really?
Yeah. They all came from Empire Casting.
Okay. Well, I know, I've been getting random checks too lately. Our good friend Caitlin O'Friel, wonderful actress from New York, she posted on her Instagram story the other day. She said she got a residual check from Boardwalk Empire for it was like $2.75 after taxes, and she's like, oh my God, you guys, I can finally afford that one-way trip to Manhattan. Like, she lives in Astoria. So she was like, I'm so excited. I can't wait to go to Manhattan with this paycheck. And like a couple hours later, I got 2 residual checks from Sneaky Pete for a grand total of like $1.19. And I took a picture of them and sent them to her. I go, I got 2 checks and I can't afford a trip to Manhattan because my bus ticket's like $2.30.
But after taxes, I can get something off the dollar menu.
Yeah, it was funny. It was like that's been the running joke with a bunch of us over here with like what our residual checks look like currently. But yeah, I'm surprised. I've gotten stuff for person of interest for international. Like, did you have a principal role or anything on Kimmy Schmidt the movie?
I did. I had a one-word thing that. It was just basically me yelling out, yeah, during if you ever saw the movie, when the Titus character was singing Freebird, you hear me, you see me, but then it cuts right before you see that I'm the one saying it.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, it was one of those things that I put in a claim for it. And I guess it's part of the claim. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe. I don't know.
That was 2 years. That was 2 years ago, so I'm not even sure myself.
Yeah, I've gotten stuff that's like it's not residual. It's like foreign royalty reuse and stuff. It's weird. I get them for person of interest all the time, and it comes in like it actually has a pink slip with it. And it's so funny because I was like, did I get fired? Or like, what is this pink slip about?
So Frank, how you?
Good. I'm doing great. I love the paychecks you guys get.
I was unexpected. Like I said, sometimes you get those, those nice couple $100, and did you get those checks that are a couple hundred pennies? I got a residual check that was $2.76 after taxes. It's good for a ride on the path from Jersey City into Manhattan. So, which was Katie O'Friel years ago, so I can relate to that. But in your case, yeah, you said BG work for Toronto. So I do want to kind of focus on that. Maybe a little bit if we have the time for audition films. I got a few of those in this case. But yeah, take me through some of the stuff you've done through Canada film, I guess we'll call it.
Oh, very, very introductory. It was a lark. I was on television doing sports, and somebody said, "Hey, why don't you come and do some extra work?" So all you do basically here, and I didn't do that much of it, but a little bit. And I was on about 3 or 4 episodes of Street Legal. I played a cop. I played somebody in a theater, one half of a couple. Then, of course, well, actually, it was 3 times I played a cop. So I had this mustache. So
you had the look, apparently. Yeah,
I had the look, and it's amazing what I can say about it. Isn't I can't. There's no comparables because being an extra is you're outside. You're basically outside the focus of what's going on. But you're in a theater and you're playing that scene and it's like it happens and it's almost as if you miss it because it happens very quickly because you're the last people that you're there waiting, and then it's zoom. It goes by. And of course, then you go home and you find out what episode it is, and then you record it, and then you watch it, and you go, "Wow, I was really good in that, wasn't I? Look at how I was standing there. It was just amazing.
Look at my foot. I did a great job with my left foot."
Absolutely. So yeah, it's a great way to pump your tires if you're into movies. There were no residual checks. There was only the check for showing up, and it was a lot of fun. It was eye-opening doing television. I find in television, especially sports, things move a lot quicker, right? Because you're trying to keep up with stuff, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with doing what you guys do, or at least what I did, you're waiting for it to happen, and then it happens, right? And then it's over.
It's a lot of times a lot of waiting too.
Hurry up and wait. That's our motto. Hurry up and wait.
Hurry up and wait. Yeah.
Yep. No, it's true. It's totally true.
It's funny. I'm getting alerts on LinkedIn right now about my work anniversary, so to speak, because next Wednesday will be the 11-year anniversary when I started, and it was the first episode. I was amazed at how slow everything ran, because when you're watching a TV show, it's 42, 46 minutes, whatever it is. You're like, okay, fine, and then you find out that it takes 12 to 15 hours to do like 4 minutes of that episode, sometimes less. Boardwalk Empire. We were talking about that beforehand. They would spend 15 hours and they would do like 35 seconds of an episode because they just had HBO money, whatever they wanted to do. Right now I'm seeing that with Severance, whatever, basically, or not Severance, Succession is an example of that. Because right now they're just using whatever HBO money they've got and they're just like, here, take it, But so, yeah, no, it's kind of funny because I guess in Toronto, it's probably a lot more, I'm guessing, seasonal than it would be in New York or say California, because I can't argue the point with you, but I can tell you that there is a lot of stuff going on in the winter. Here, we have studios here now. I'm in no way on the same level of you guys of understanding the business, but through osmosis and driving around. Near where I used to live, where they shot Suits was a studio, and they shot a lot of stuff there. It was actually an airport. It was an Army airport where they did it, and it was an interesting prospect to go around. And when you go around Toronto, there are a lot of places where they do that stuff. And because I was involved with people in television, there was a bit of a correlation because the same way. You do sports, you also do theater, so if you're in the arts, you don't necessarily pigeonhole yourself. You literally spread yourself around because you want to get multiple checks coming in the mail, no matter how large or how small. Sure.
So, yeah, so there's a lot of places around here, and they're pretty busy in the winter too. In Canada, it's across Canada. There's a lot of growth going on. The regular stops were Montreal, Vancouver, the big cities. But now we're getting a lot of the small towns that are getting involved, especially because of the TV shows or movies that you do, like Big Sky, the TV shows that are in the woods. So Vancouver gets those. Then you get the ones in the country. You'll have places like Winnipeg that'll be getting a show, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's it's all about the advantage that they have in Canada here, in as far as being Hollywood North is the expenses. It's cost certainty. Not everybody here has unlimited HBO money. Some people are using limited Netflix money. So
But here's
I was
the one
going to say, Manitoba, I know, like, when I get my breakdowns for a lot of stunt stuff, there's a lot of things that are filming in, like, Winnipeg, Manitoba, up in that area in Winnipeg. So they're not. I think what they do a lot too in Canada is I remember one of the cinematographers who was like our second unit DP for Sneaky Pete one season. He had it was season 2. He was leaving to go to Toronto, he had shot a bunch of like splinter units with us, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to Toronto to finish up Suits, and they did it in blocks. And he said a lot of times what they would do as well, like in the winter, he was familiar, he'd worked up there. If the weather's bad, they, like Frank was saying, they have the studios, they do everything interior. And they just pump out the interiors. They'll just shoot everything, like episodes, just keep going. And then if they got to go outside, it's kind of like with CSI New York used to do here. They actually filmed in LA. They would basically shoot most of their season. And if they needed anything specific, they're like, okay, we're going to go to New York. We got to go shoot in Central Park. We got to go shoot on the East River or Staten Island or something. I remember like Kinnear was here when we were literally like a bunch of us were doing like cop stuff with them and just going around like, yeah, this is like episode 6. This is episode 12. And they're like, it was a bunch of random stuff that they were like, they had to specifically shoot in New York. Came in, knocked it out in 3 or 4 days, and like, oh yeah, like this episode airs next week that we just shot yesterday. Like it's went to the editor, it'll be ready to go. Like, oh, okay.
It's almost like the editor of those Hallmark movies.
Yeah.
Yes, but which, by the way, that season's going to be starting up in Connecticut pretty soon. We'll get back to that a little bit later. But the one thing about Toronto and Canada, maybe you have the answer on this. There's a show that I can't specifically name in this case because it probably breaks certain FCC regulations. So it's a well-known, popular show that I personally love the snot out of. Eugene Levy,
yes.
Catherine O'Hara.
I'm currently binge watching it.
We'll call it Pooh's Creek if I could just work my way around this.
I was thinking about this because I wanted to talk about because I was binging it and I go, can I actually say the title on the air because someone's going to take it the wrong way?
What I found out from sorry,
well, why don't you just call it Lipschitz Creek?
Yeah,
there you go.
Could do that. Sorry if I got distracted. There's a gigantic spider crawling right over there at this point, and I was just like, you one of those things where you're just minding your own business, then you just see it out of the corner of your eye. So sorry, I'll be watching you and him at the same time. But one of the things about that is that was filmed in the Toronto area, I think.
Yeah, in a small town outside Toronto.
It was okay. By my understanding, from what Colbert said, is that you're allowed to actually say what the name of the show is, as long as there's a subtitle at the bottom, which has the spelling of it. That's how you work around it. Otherwise, you have to come up with creative ways of trying to explain the show. Like I said, Pooh's Creek, Lipschitz Creek probably works too. Whatever you have to do. And if it doesn't work, we will be the first ones to hear about it. We'll handle that too.
They used to be worried about that. I can actually understand that and can remember that kind of stuff going on. But as it became more popular and after it started winning awards, we were too proud to worry about little stuff like that.
Well, it's funny because that show brought Canada, I think, a lot of cred. Because, I love the show. I openly, happy cried at the end of that. And watching that show, you see it's obviously filmed in Canada and taking place in some unmentioned state. It doesn't really, clarify where it is. But you get to see, like I said, filming in Canada and airing in the U.S., which is not a common thing. By my understanding, I think 50% of shows that air in Canada, and correct me if I'm wrong, have to be filmed in Canada as well. That's my understanding.
No, I don't think that. I don't think that's true. But what is true is that here, because of it's about the programming. It's how they program. Like we have HBO here, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the HBO shows are. You're right. They're filmed in Canada. Now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of the programming that we have here, we don't emphasize that they're made in Canada, but if you watch the credits, eventually you see ACTRA and you get the impression, oh yeah, okay, that was made here too. And of course, we Canadians, and I'm sure people in towns in the U.S., New York excluded, LA excluded, because they get so much attention, but other towns in in the U.S., I'm sure when they film a show, they go, "Hey, that's here in Wyoming. What the heck?" Right? So there's this pride factor, and yes, we do. Music is something that we did control in Canada. That's something I think it gets a reputation because of that. You know, we did do that to help our musical artists. They needed the help because of the inundation. A lot of people blamed America. It wasn't America. It was England. And they affected you guys too. I mean, there was a time you guys are two puppies. You won't remember, but there was a time when most of the artists were from England, from Britain, not the U.S.
Yeah, at that point, obviously Beatles, Rolling Stones, Zeppelin,
all of them, they were
Who,
dominating. So here, what they did was to help make Neil Young have a career, Rush, and such. That's one end. The other end, for since you seem interested, the other end is a lot of Canadian bands would have to go to the U.S. and then become famous there, and then they would be accepted in Canada. Neil Young, Bachman Turner Overdrive, all these groups made it in the U.S. and then we kind of respect them. Then Canadians have this inferiority complex that's not hard to have in the giant shadow that is cast by the United States of America.
We live in New Jersey. We are constantly in the shadow of New York.
You understand.
So I understand where you're coming from there. New Jersey in this case also has that level of excitement. Because New Yorkers, they don't care. They get more annoyed than anything when something's filming there. But if we have something filming here, there's news articles all over the place. Patrick Dempsey shot something in Western New Jersey. I forget what it was. And there was articles all over about the fact that Patrick Dempsey comes to New Jersey. And people, I remember seeing this when they shot whatever that HBO thing was about the alternate timeline in World War II. And I was there. We were down in like Westfield, New Jersey. There was about 300 people at midnight in the middle of April, just standing there, just staring at you because you're in these classic wardrobe. And they were just so fired up to just see all of these people dressed like this. They'd never seen it before. New York, it's like, get out of my way. They'll throw an elbow into you. But here in Jersey, like I said, it's Canada. You get a little excited by this feeling of pride saying, I recognize that location there.
Yeah, it's like that in Philly even more so. Yeah. Like down in Southwest Jersey, like Philly, they get the Creed movies. They get a couple. They get less than Jersey. So when they get something, it's like soup. They're just like, oh my God, it's coming here and this and that, and it's like such a big deal for them. Yeah, and like I know like there are a couple other shows you were saying that air here that are filmed in Canada that I've watched. I know like Working Moms is another CBC show.
Canadian one, yep.
Yeah, I love that. There's a couple on Netflix. Like I during the shutdown, I was binge watching so much stuff on Netflix, and I'd be like, oh, where's this film? Like, oh, okay, Vancouver. Like a lot of stuff on the CW network films up in Vancouver because it's just more cost effective for them to be up there. And like even we have the issues with like New Mexico and Georgia are right to work states. So California and New York lose a lot of work there because again, it's just more cost effective for production companies to pack up. Like Netflix just built $1 billion studio in New Mexico. Like they're going to be out there for at least a decade.
Now, just in this case here, and asking for a friend, not just myself, wink, wink. Right to work is what?
It's a really good question because it just means like for us in our union, it means that all the background actors are non-union. Like the principal performers, the stunt performers, the crew, everybody's union except the extras, basically. Like it's right to work means everyone has the right to work. So it's a gray area because you could go to a right to work state and work under a union contract because they can't stop you from it, but it's designed to, there's so many, we sit in meetings and we're like, they explain it to us and it only gets more complicated because when you bring the other argument up, like, well, if I go down there and I do this, I'm a union employee. They're like, yeah, but if I do this, I'm not. They're like, yeah. So it's, the right to work states, that's the big thing is that it's just not for us in like SAG-AFTRA, it's non-union background work.
Which is interesting because actually a lot of the shows that film down there, I'm not talking like Stranger Things or, Cobra Kai, but I'm talking like Walking Dead. Yeah. Those BG that play zombies have to go to school to learn how to walk like that. And they're getting like $8 an hour, $9 an hour, to go in the full makeup. And obviously they're on the clock while they're doing that, sure. But that's a lot of work for a check that's going to be more than likely less than $100.
Yeah.
Especially as they're going French hours in a lot of places.
But that'd be one of those shows that people would want to be on. right?
Yeah, that's the thing is even stunt performers go down there just to do it, to say they did it and get killed. Like, oh yeah, I played a zombie and I got killed on The Walking Dead. But yeah, that's the thing is it's such a big show that it's the kind of like just the experience to say, oh, I did it. I was on that show. So people are willing to take the hit for it. It's up here. It's very similar to anytime we get like big movies up here, like the last one was probably Joker. Everybody had to be part of Joker because it was like the big movie to work on. So we'll probably get a couple more as the summertime rolls in and like everybody gets excited. Like, oh, I got to work this movie. Like, whenever Scorsese comes to town, it's like, I got to be on a Scorsese flick. And like me and Scott were like, yeah, man, we did Boardwalk Empire pilot. We're good. We did the 17 hours with them. Have fun.
Yeah, but that looks good on your resume too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you could drop it in there, it looks nice.
It does. I remember I did a gigantic fight scene in there. That was really cool because it ended up on the stunt reel. But it was funny because I never did a 17-hour day on Boardwalk. 15 hours I did, but never. They would give out golden time and they would give out checks just like basically they're giving out bottles of water. That was Scorsese, whatever Scorsese wanted. I think if I remember right, correct me if I'm wrong, but the pilot episode of that, they had 22-hour work days. Where they would have days where they're just doling out thousands of dollars to everybody. I
was on 2 days on the pilot. One was 16 and a half hours, just under 17. And the last day I worked on the pilot, which was the Prohibition Parade scene. If anybody who's ever seen it, I'm the dude pushing the baby carriage filled with alcohol while my wife is carrying the baby. And that was a 21-hour day. And it was just like you're on autopilot by like hour 14 or 15. I remember just going to holding, putting my head down, taking a nap and getting up and then trying to push this baby carriage it was an old fashioned, like vintage baby carriage with really thin wheels that were falling between the slats on the board slats on the boardwalk. So we had to push it on an angle. And at that point too, like the background's just exhausted. Like they don't want to get out of the way. They're trying to, because in the shot, it's Steve Buscemi and, the other guy, I can never remember his name. He got fired from the show later on too.
Not Imperioli. Was it? No,
I forget. Michael something was his name, but it's them walking. Then they
season 2.
Yeah, they like pick us up. They pan off to them and follow them, and it was funny because like the first take, they got us, they got Steve. They drop back and bam, they take out one of the lights on the techno crane, took out one of the lights on the boardwalk. And I'm like, we were so close to doing that in a oneer. Like, oh, and then like 3 hours later, we were still going. And I remember they took a guy who was probably bigger than Scott, and he just goes, follow me. And he just boxed everybody out and cleared a path. And we came walking down. And we finally got it because somebody was like, "Oh, you can't push a baby carriage," and the AD's like, "You can't get out of the way. That's the problem." He's like, "They're not the problem. It's you. Like, get out of the way." And like it literally took like 4 or 5 hours to shot with a techno crane. That's why whenever I see techno cranes on set, I cringe now. I'm like, no, like why? Can't we just go to studio mode? It'd be so much easier.
But again, that was, like I said, that's whatever he wanted that budget to be. And obviously you did 21 hours. So you're walking away with probably low 4 digits, I guess, or darn close to it.
No, I was non-union at the time.
Oh,
that was like right before I became union. I was like, oh man, I wish. Cause there was somebody, I remember the 21-hour day. I forget who I was working with. Somebody was saying something and holding, and they turned around. They go, "Dude, we've been here for 21 hours. We're gonna have," and it said like, he goes, "After taxes, we're gonna have a a check for like $12.50 after taxes."
It is amazing how fast you do math when basically, when you start pulling in hours like that. But unfortunately, in this case, non-union. So
I still pulled a couple hundred. Like I remember the check being nice. I was like, wow. I was like, I knew I worked a lot when I saw that check. I was like, okay, I definitely earned my money.
But Frank's been so patient over there too. Been so quiet.
I'm fine. I just look, if I can contribute, I will. Trust me. I'll stick one in there somewhere.
Perfect. Yeah.
No, it's like in life. That's what it's like. My previous life, I was in construction. So those 18, 20-hour days, same thing with you. You slide into them. You don't really know what's going to happen. So it's not like you said to yourself 14 hours earlier, I'm going to have a couple extra hours sleep. So I guess I can relate to the challenge that it is.
Yeah, it's always the day you think, like you go in. I always tell people, don't go in with any expectations. I say, because you're going to go in thinking, oh, I'm going to be here all day. It's going to be a long shit. Like, because there's shows that are notorious here in New York for having long days. And people will come in and be like, oh, it's going to be like a 12 and a half hour day. And then, boom, you're done in 6. And they're like, no, oh my God, what happened? All my overtime that I thought I was going to get. And then there's other days where you're like, oh, I hope I'm done early. And you're like 14 hours later, you're just like, oh my God. Like, that was me a couple weeks ago on Mrs. Maisel. I had no idea what to expect. And even now, everything's kind of like 12-hour days, like 5 a.m. call time. I was on set for, I was on the clock for 14 and a half hours. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't bad. It's like when the day goes by and you're doing stuff, it's like when you're busy, it's not as bad. There's days where you're just like, you're stuck in holding or something with nothing to do. Like you forgot your phone charger. You're just like, this is miserable. I mean, I remember being on Mr. Robot the first season, and we had this weird schedule. It wasn't weird. It was just the way the dialogue and the scenes were set up. Like we'd shoot one scene, then we'd break, and then we'd go to shoot, like we worked with Rami a lot because we were in the All Safe office. So we'd shoot one scene, we'd break, then we'd go shoot like a scene for Portia in the apartment or somebody or Carly or whatever. And we'd jump back to the All Safe set later on. So we would end up with like 2 or 3 hours of downtime and holding, and this is at the Silver Cup studio. So we'd go upstairs to commissary and catering. And I remember our buddy Rich Haas was with us. Rich Haas, our other friend Andy Conrad, one of them brought Cards Against Humanity. And that became the official game of like Mr. Robot season 1.
Story too.
Yeah, we would play. It was epic because we'd have like 3-hour games of like Cards Against Humanity, just laughing hysterically. We'd come back to set and everyone's like, what were you guys doing? Like they were taking naps and we're just like goofing around for 3 hours. But it would get the time to go by and it wouldn't feel like you were just sitting around doing nothing. And we're like, oh, we got to go back and shoot our scene. Okay. And we'd come back and they're like, okay, you guys are like functioning. You're attentive. You're not. I'm like, no, like we've been awake. We've been having fun.
Emotionally refreshed.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Like I always tell, even when I went to LA, I was like, try to find something to do just to keep yourself sharp. Because you just sit there, you take a nap, then you get up and you're like, oh, now I got to wake up. I got to get the blood flowing again. And when you're doing stuff, like you said, it's mentally, you're awake. Emotionally, you're happy. You're like, okay, let's go shoot this scene and let's go have some fun. I was like notorious I was just talking with Alex East and Brandon. And every time we bring up Mr. Robot, she's like, those damn T-Rex arms. And the one day I was sitting with my back to camera and just started picking everything up in my cubicle with T-Rex arms and typing. And everyone who could see me is laughing. The entire hair and makeup department is off camera to my left. I look over as I had to get up and walk out of frame, off screen. And as I walk over, they're all like, their hands are in their face. No one is looking at me. And they're like, I just remember, and I hear Alex trying to hold in her laughter. And it was like when you try to hold it in and it like squeaks out through your nose, like, and everyone's about to lose it. I ended up with my face in Rami Malek's like cash chair. And I was just like, please, someone yell cut. Jesus, someone yell cut. Just yell cut. And finally, our second AD's like, cut. And the entire hair and makeup department busts out laughing. The BG's hysterical laughing. And they're like, our first AD's like, what's going on over there? What's going on? And we thought we were all getting fired. And just, it took like 2 takes. No one would look at each other for the next 2 takes. We're just like, look at the floor, look at the wall. No one made eye contact with each other because we all had to like just regroup. And we were finally done with that setup. They're like, don't ever do that again because we'll all get fired. But I always see, she sends me text messages randomly now. She'll be like, T-Rex arms.
But, all right, so we are currently halfway through at this point. It is now 9:30, so time is flying when you're having fun. Thank you again, as always, to Mr. Frank Sinisi for coming on. Mr. Rob Stats, as always. You can and by the way, I'm not closing out the show, although it just sounded like I was doing that right there. Halfway through, I'm just thinking to myself, this sounds like I'm closing the show. Find us always on Facebook at Tales from the Film Set and Twitter at Film Set Tales. This is Tales from the Film Set. Continuing on right now, since it is about 9:30. I did want to talk a little bit about the audition process as well. I wanted to talk namely about fails. One of the things that came up recently that showed up in like my Facebook memory, which Facebook is a unique anomaly in regards to, it tells you all the really embarrassing things that you thought were funny at the time. And then years later, you look back and you're like, oh my God, this is terrible. I had an audition for ESPN at one point. Now, if you look at me, obviously, you can kind of tell I'm a little bit on the bright side. I'm a little bit, shall we say, light-skinned, pale-skinned is the way I usually basically referred to. I had an audition for ESPN. I don't know why they wanted me to do this, but they wanted everybody to do it with their shirt off. It was legal. It was okay. I mean, it was acceptable. It wasn't one of those things, yeah, take your shirt off kind of thing. But it was, so I'm like, okay, fine. So, taking my shirt off. I'm on a green screen, kind of like I am back here. And they're looking at it. It's like, nah, try and do it again. So they're sitting there and they're adjusting. They're just kind of sitting there, just, futzing with the lights a little bit, trying to figure out what can work, trying to do some things with the lights, trying to change them around a bit. Is that going to work? No, it's not going to work. How's that? Finally, after about 6 minutes of just doing all of this, they finally gave up and like, all right, we're going to have to just go with this. This is the best we can do to make him look human. And I'm looking at this and thinking, I got no shot at this. And I remember it was one of those things that came up in my Facebook memories just like a few days ago. And I'm like, I completely forgot about the fact that I had this no-shot audition that my manager was cool enough to send me on. And he's like, how did it go? And I'm like, well, we'll have to see how things go. And in the back of my mind, I'm not going to tell him. I was like, yeah, they thought I was actually too pasty and there's no way in hell I'm getting this. But it showed up on Facebook. It's like, by the way, just want to remind you of this really embarrassing thing that happened to you. You were shirtless when you were 240 pounds, by the way. Just want to add that too, in case you want to basically remind yourself of the man boobs that you had at that point.
That reminds me, I had one for probably two worst audition stories, or one was for a commercial. It was supposed to be, I remember Tony Tate, office linebacker.
Yes, I stood in for the guy who was the office guy for that. And
it was supposed to be like a spinoff of that. And I walk in and they're like, oh, is it okay if he tackled like this dude was like 200-pound linebacker looking guy? And they were like, yeah, we have a mat there or whatever. And I'm like, okay, yeah, the dude. And I'm thinking like, everybody in here is a stunt performer. Like, this guy knows how to do it. Nope. This dude tackled me. It hit me and basically shot me over the pad. We went into the wall. I'm like, I was amazed I didn't end up in the next audition room. I remember just slamming into the wall, and I'm like, oh, this is going to suck when I get it. And like, I walked downstairs, and by the time I got to the subway, this was in the city. I was like walking down the steps. I'm like, I'm going to have a stiff neck tomorrow. My shoulder's going to hurt. And then the other one was for Madam Secretary. It was for an EMT. It was Polish, or Eastern European. They give us this line in Polish that you have to say. And I walk in and the casting director is like, so did you learn the lines in Russian? And I'm like, it was Polish, wasn't it? And he's like, oh, yeah, same thing. And I'm like,
totally wrong in some cases.
Not so much. But I remember just doing it. And I'm like, I walk out. I was like, yeah, I didn't even want the role at that point. Just when he was like, oh, yeah, no one's going to know the difference, whatever. I'm like, really? You sent us the lines. Like, why didn't you just tell me to say it in English then if nobody's going to care? But it was, and I remember everybody after that, they were saying like that particular casting director, like, oh yeah, we always get the wrong scripts and everything. We'd show up and they're like, what are you reading? Like, this is what you sent me. Oh no, that's the wrong scene. Can you, and then expect you to like hand you the right sides and expect you to read it cold after like one read. Like, can you just do that cold? Like, no, like, you want me to go outside for 10 minutes and then come back in and try?
No, I want to see how you can do. Let's try it the way it is right now. Yeah, I know. It's such a weird mystery. Personally, I like it the way it is right now, where it's all through Zoom and remote and all this kind of stuff, especially coming from New Jersey, because, it's such a long trip to go to New York. I mean, when you're living local, like you live in Toronto, you audition in Toronto, it's not so bad. When you're living in New Jersey and you're auditioning in New York, it is a multi-hour process for a 2-minute audition. And Lord knows how many times I've auditioned for Maisel, and I think Good Fight too, over and over and over again, and just never got a thing out of it. So you get yourself cleaned up, you drive over there, you do all this kind of stuff, you pay all the money, and they're like, okay, I need you to audition and go. Here are your glasses, sir. Thank you. Do it again. Here are your glasses, sir. Okay, cool. And then that's the end of it. And then, and you never hear from them after 4 or 5 hours. It's beautiful now. Thank you, COVID, for the fact that we're able to do all this stuff remotely. But it's funny because, you see these audition things that are going on. You see the process of what to be done. And when you come from the corporate world, like I had, where you're used to the very professional, you sit down, this is what I'm looking to do, that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, not you. Good. Go bye. And that's just like, is it me? You kind of sit there and you look at it like, did I offend here? I don't know. And it took me a while to understand that part of it, to understand that it has so much to do with your appearance and how it fits into a piece of a puzzle, as opposed to whatever your specific skills happen to be. And like I said, when you come from the corporate world, you have a mentality that's a certain way. And then you find out the hard way that the film industry is 100% different from that.
I have a friend in LA. I don't really think she's performing as much anymore. She used to, ironically, did a couple Hallmark movies. Did one with like Jerry Stiller called Ice Dreams. Her name's Noelle Bruno.
Jerry Stiller.
And actually she worked with Tiffany Thiessen's husband on Ice Dreams. And I remember though, when I first started going out to LA on a regular basis, I would always hang out with her while I was out there. And she had been auditioning for like McDonald's commercials all the time, like national commercials, and was literally like final two, kept missing it. Final two, they had her pegged for one. Like it was a couples thing. And like you said, its appearance and fitting into a puzzle. Casting director's like, okay, I think it's you. It's going to be you. Like, this is the one.
Yeah, that.
They switched the male lead for the commercial to I think it was an African American male, and then they wanted to do an ethnic couple altogether rather than mix, and they switched out to the other person. They were like, "Oh my god!" I remember her just like she's like, "What is it going to take to get one?" And she finally ended up getting a smaller commercial, but it was just like I said, it's all about. Sometimes it's not you; it's everything else around you and fitting into that puzzle and that equation. So I used to joke when we did The Deuce, I love our ADs, and our AD was notorious for like, oh, we added a scene? Yeah, don't worry about casting that one. And we would show up and they're like, hey, can you guys run to wardrobe for color cover? And we go to wardrobe and they're like, oh, we're so happy for you. And we're like, what? They're like, I'm like, wait, I just need a color cover. It's like, no. You're getting a full costume. You have lines. This is how me and Kevin Nunez found out we got principal roles on it. We went to wardrobe and they're like, we got to go back to set. They're like, no. You're not going to set today. Like we were getting fit for our costumes for the scene. And we walked in, our PA Liz comes in. She's like, here's your sides. And it was like this big surprise, but our AD's awesome like that. When you work with her consistently, anytime there's like a last minute change or something, it's like, well, because that's why I always tell people who stand in, I'm like, show them you can work off book, that you can run lines and everything. I said, because you never know when it's going to come up. I said, somebody might get sick, somebody might get stuck in traffic or miss a flight, or it just may not work, or they may add something and be like, hey, we can't shoot this scene. Let's go shoot this one. We're going to do it with the stand-in instead. I said, and there's your upgrade. So that's the stuff where I'll be back on Equalizer tomorrow running my lines, because if I have a great group second team over there, like, yo, let's do lines. I'm like, okay.
Now, see, I'm not that lucky to get Equalizer because it's too close to my house. They will only give me the jobs that are like all the way out in the farthest part of Long Island. Not the ones that are 10 minutes away. This is part of the problem, Frank, that we have down here. When you're in New Jersey, like I said, it's kind of
relate. I can relate, buddy. Oh, I can relate. I used to supervise big projects, construction projects.
Okay.
And there were always these projects that were like 10 minutes from the house. And I would get the project an hour and 10 minutes from the house. And I would always ask the boss, like, and you guys probably get the same answer. Sorry, Frank, that's just the luck of the draw.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Where it's kind of like, basically, it's like, yeah, we'll keep you in mind for the next one.
That's exactly what they would say. Yeah. And it actually happened once. It caught me totally by surprise. It's like your story, Bob, that you were saying, be ready because it could happen, right? And just when I didn't think I'd get a job close to home, I ended up with it. Some guy got sick. He couldn't go for a week. So they said, you'll start it. You finish it.
Well, it's been me. Yeah. Like I've been living like the life lately with Equalizer. Like a buddy, Kevin, they were doing tandem units right now. So they were like, hey, can you come in and been in the studio? Even if we're not in the studio, we're somewhere nearby in Jersey. Like today, I just drove out there real quick to do my test, like 15-minute drive. I'm like, oh, I wish every day could be like this. Like this is the life. And like I said, I remember when they first started filming back over here a couple of years ago, and I think I was like, I'd be on White Collar, be in Brooklyn. Everything was in Brooklyn, and like Enemy Within was in Jersey. Emergence was in Jersey. I'm like, why can't I get these gigs? I got our buddy Tony who's and it's ironic. I always tell Tony,
Talifiero?
Tony Stevens.
Okay, yeah,
he's always on. He lives in New York, and he ends up on every single project that films in New Jersey. And he's like, I just want to go back on the other side of the river, man. He's like, and a lot of times he drives in. So he's like, yeah, he goes, it's not bad coming in because there's no toll. He's like, but going back, and he's like a lot of the shows he's on, they run long days. If he's usually in for like one of the leads, like one of the top 2 or 3 people. And I'm like, yeah, man. I remember, anytime we film up in Nyack too, it's not so bad. Like just right up the Palisades Interstate Parkway. You're like, okay, this is nice, relaxing drive. No tolls. I can deal with this.
It's a beautiful ride. You got trees on both sides there, the nice hills and everything. Well, if you remember Slogan, he was Morris Chestnut stand-in on Enemy Within for the duration there, and he lived all the way out in like eastern Brooklyn. So to go from there to Jersey with no car. He dealt with that. Oh yeah, that's stress that he had to go with. I mean, they gave him the ride; it wasn't that big a deal. But he's like, I really wish I was back at Steiner or someplace closer. Yeah. And I'm like, I'll trade with you. You know, I'm not a 6'2" black man, but you know what? I did stay at Holiday Inn Express last night.
Yeah, that's people don't realize that. Like when you're out in like Canarsie, like when I was working on Godfather Harlem and Younger, it's like an hour drive without traffic for me, and I'm like, man, like the one day I went out there for something, they're like, oh, do you want to take the train out? And I thought about it, but I'm like, I don't know what time I'm going to get done. Like I was just out there for something. They're like, oh, take the M. And I'm like, no, it's for Power. I was on Power Book 2, and I had a 3:00 call time, and I was like, I'm probably going to be done early, but I was like, I can't risk it, and I don't even know where I am, and like I'm just like in Eastern Brooklyn, and it's like if we get done late, like I'm kind of screwed. I don't know how to get back. The train may not be running. I may not want to take the train because it's the orange line.
That's
the M.
Weird. Yeah.
Like that's anybody who's not from like New York, like the JM line is like, you get a little suspect when you start going out into like the far part of Brooklyn on. And I remember like that was the one train where they're like, that's the one you got to be careful on, like late at night, because it's just kind of like it's off the beaten path of everything else. And I'm like, oh, great. I was like, all right, I'm driving in. I'll find parking. Thankfully, I did find parking like 2 blocks from where we were filming. And I wrapped early, and then I just drove back home. I was like,
they didn't give you a safety ride on that?
No, I was.
I mean, in the end, it didn't matter, but they should have offered that.
I think we've done before 9 anyway.
So, okay. All right. So then continuing on, as we got about 10-ish minutes left at this point. This is Tales from the Film Set. You can always find us on Twitter at FilmSetTales or Tales from the Film Set on Facebook. Alongside us, and I want to give Frank a chance here at this point. Candid Frank Stanisi has a show, or 1 or 2 shows, I believe, on the Spanglish Sports World Network. By the way, the irony of today is the fact that this is also currently being broadcast on the Her Network, even though there are no, in fact, women on this show today. But you know what, we'll make do. As long as Eduardo and the Zingo people don't really care, I guess it's probably okay. But Frank, tell us a little bit about the show you've got. Tell us about yourself as well. Go for it.
Okay. Well, I used to be on a cable network here before there was such a thing in Toronto. Before there was the sport, we have the Sports Network and TSN. There was none, so we became the people that broadcast a lot of sports that you are used to today. So I did that for almost 20 years, and basically now the shows that I do, it's a return back to doing radio and television. We do a CFL show, the Canadian Football League, a lot of XFL connection there, and then I do a lacrosse show, which is basically the National Lacrosse League, and we do cover college lacrosse and a bit of field lacrosse. And then we do the Leaf Show, which is Leaf Talk and more. And I do a news show, and we talk about news. So I stay busy on Spanglish. It keeps me busy. And the news that we do is North American. So I'm very up to date with what's going on in the United States. And as far as films and stuff like that, my hobby is watching movies. One new show, ironically, that I just started watching, it's not new. It's in its 7th season. Bob mentioned it. Rob mentioned it. Younger. Started watching watching that. Very interesting, very interesting show. And I can imagine how much fun that would be to shoot that show. They do a lot of exterior shots there. How's that for a segue?
Nice. Yeah, they do actually.
Shot
yeah,
go ahead.
And I was in the studio for most of the stuff we shot in the Empirical office. I filled in last season. It's different. I think Scott probably say this too. A lot of the stuff we shoot here is typically police procedurals, dramas. And when you get on a show that's a comedy like Younger, Girls Five Ever, that'll be out on the Peacock Network in a couple weeks, Kimmy Schmidt, like it's just a different vibe altogether. Like I remember shooting some of the scenes, and especially with the comedies, like a lot of times the cast has kind of free reign to improvise, you know, in certain situations. And I remember there was one scene for this final season, and the one, I forget who said it, but it was like they were talking about olive oil and stuff, and we're just walking, and none of us knew what the lines were, and we just heard this thing about olive oil, and about three of us in the middle of the scene just turned and looked, and we're like, what did you just say? And we're like, and we just went about our business, and they're like, do that every take. That is for like happy accident of like to like react to it that way, like don't like, because it wasn't like an overreaction. We were just like, what? I'm like, they're like, yeah, just subtly like look over, like you heard what she said. So it's like, okay, so we'd be walking by and we're like, what did she say? And then, but it's usually a completely different vibe on it. Like when I started off on Girls Five Ever before I had to go to Hawkeye for Marvel, and you're just
that's a change.
Yeah, like it was like a 180. But I was like, oh, I was so happy I had finally gotten on like a comedy, and like just the environment and the vibe is completely different, and you're like, oh, it's such a relief.
The crew, it's funny with the Younger, I've seen this, where the crew has we're filming what now, and that kind of approach where it has a lighter feel. I've noticed that. I mean, I haven't done Younger nearly as often, I think, Rob, as you have, but I found Younger to just be a very pleasant set where I think the best way to describe it, the cast is grateful.
Yeah.
They have an attitude of gratitude to be on there, where sometimes you have these other shows where they feel like the show deserves them as opposed to the other way around. And maybe because it's a TV land thing, I'm not sure, but everybody on there really feels like a family because they're like, we got something here, and they're proud of what they've done, and they bonded over the fact that they landed this thing. I think is what it really comes down to. So yeah, like I said, I haven't done much with it. COVID test, some episode I think where they changed the name from Empirical, and it was spoilers if that hasn't come out yet. Whoops.
Sorry. No,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that from a viewer's perspective, there's it's the cast as a whole. There's a chemistry there that they've fallen into, and I think that vibe kind of carries through the rest of the the crew and you always listen. I'm not a movie expert. I'm the last, but I love movies, and I believe the director deserves a lot of credit there because of the relaxed nature that they throw out there for that kind of cast. It works out.
Yeah. And I think
it's a start with the top two, like Sutton Foster is just like so down to earth, and Hillary. The few episodes I did work on, you could see, like Frank said, there's that connection and that chemistry, and it trickles down. And Scott will tell you, like here we've had shows where horror stories about like cast members where you're just like, oh my god, like you'd be taking bets on how bad the day was going to be or what they were going to flip out over, or
if they're going to even show up.
Yeah.
We talked about that show a few times.
One of the shows I just worked on, we had to go back and shoot stuff because one of the series regulars was having some personal issues. And like they said one day, they're like, yeah, they showed up and they hadn't showered in like 3 or 4 days. And they're like, okay, we really can't do anything with you. And the person basically had to like take a couple weeks off to get themselves straightened out, and then came back and they were shooting some stuff. We had to get caught up on what they had fallen behind on. But yeah, the Youngers definitely, like I said, it was the vibe was amazing. The chemistry was there, and it was just a fun set to work on.
Yeah. It's a lot like Found Money, right?
What's that?
When they all show up, it's like Found Money.
Yeah.
And speaking, yeah. Because I think they realize that they have that mentality. It's like, okay, we're getting paid to be where we want to be, not where we have to be. And
it goes to what you were saying, Rob, about if your expectations aren't too high, you can end up somewhere really nice.
Yeah.
And TV Land is not something that I really know well. I know of it. It used to be a station, right, that showed a lot of repeats and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right. And so, when you're an actor, I guess when you end up on a show that's on that network, you're saying to yourself, okay, we're the guinea pigs. And then something like that happens. It must be awesome. That's all I can say.
And amazingly, that's 7 seasons now.
Exactly. I saw that and I went, how did I not know that was around for 7 seasons? And then I saw the logo on the bottom and it said TV Land. And I said, well, that's probably why. Not because it's a bad network, but because here in Canada, we don't have TV Land. We get pieces of it here.
Sure. Well, it's down here. I think a lot of people don't even realize there's original programming on TV Land anyway, because TV Land in this side is more of what we remember from the 80s, the 90s, and so help me God, the 2000s at this point, and all the the old stuff, the classic.
There's a lot of syndication. It's been a lot of shows that are into syndication.
Yeah. I think House is on
about. A lot of those checks you were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, they pay the same, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's like TV Land and Ion are like probably the 2 big syndication channels that we have, because Ion is like
WeTV too.
Yeah, but like I know Ion is actually, I didn't know Ion's basically part of like basic television, like pretty standard, because we were having a discussion about that with one of the last contracts. Like, oh yeah, Ion is like kind of a staple between CBS, like whatever, depending on how your networks fall, like what channel they're on. But it's kind of like the basic television syndication network, and like CW would be after that or whatever.
Well, Ion is usually just nothing but like cop shows.
Yeah.
Law and Order, Criminal Minds. I mean, the amount of Law and Orders that are on, it's like pretty much 24/7 here in New Jersey. You can find a rerun of Law and Order on some channel around here. And I was like, how much money is like Sam Waterston making off of those residuals? Or Mariska from 22 seasons now.
22 seasons of
Of
SVU.
Law and Order, Ice-T's got 21 under his belt with that. Oy. So
there's a great have you ever heard the cupcake story from SVU?
What's that? Maybe. I don't think so.
There was a stand-in who was fired from SVU for slapping a set dresser because they threw out. This person was notorious for leaving like coffee cups and food on set, like while we were setting up the shot or rehearsal. And the set dressers were getting mad, and finally they just started throwing everything out, and they threw out like an artisanal cupcake or brownie on this person, and they flipped out and they slapped them. And we're like, how'd they not get fired? They're like, no, they were just relieved of their duties. They went to another show, and it became a whole like thing came out of it. But it was so funny because I remember going to SVU like right after it happened, and I was like, so you guys have any cupcakes? And they started laughing. They were like, who else knows about this? I'm like, everyone knows about this story. Like it broke like right away. Like 2 days after it happened, everyone in New York knew about it.
Game of Thrones coffee cup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we gotta wrap this up, but I will say that I was on SVU last Friday at night. The replacement was there. Misha was there, and so was Steve Sands. I think we're going to have to do a Steve Sands story at some point. For those that don't know, Frank, in your case as well, Steve Sands is the paparazzi of paparazzi. He's the paparazzi that paparazzis go to ask for advice on how to paparazzi. And he was there Friday taking his pictures like he always does. So I think we need to do a tribute to Steve, which ironically I have his cell number in my phone.
Oh, God.
I don't know why, I just do. But maybe that's a show for another time. We got to wrap this up, though. But thank you to Rob Stats for being on. Thank you for Frank Stanisi for being on as well. I appreciate this. You guys were really, really awesome. I'm grateful for that. You can always find this show on Zingo TV, channel 250 and 251. You can find us on Twitter at Film Set Tales and Tales from the Film Set on Facebook. We got a couple of new things coming down the pipeline. I'll keep you guys posted if you stay close to social media on that front. And as for me, I'm Scott Schertzen. This show can be seen on 35 different platforms across 4 different continents. So feel free to check us out there as well. And have a great night. Have a great tomorrow. And be awesome. Be good.
Thank you.